Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to be doing my take on no forest on flat earth. Um, I've been talking about, pointed out that really every civilization in the world has had these two, either one or the other or both of these concepts. So the earliest civilizations in the world, they had this idea of a tree of life or a world tree. So the ancient Egyptian civilization, they had the idea of the sycamore. So they knew that Earth was a flat plane, and at the center there was a giant tree. Also in the Hungarian civilizations, they had the idea of the Falagfa, and the Mayans and the Aztecs, they had the idea of a tree of life at the center of a flat earth. And in Hindu civilizations, they had the idea of the Asvata. So these early civilizations, they had this idea of the tree of life or a world tree at the center of the earth. And then later, once we got the Vedic cosmology, once the Vedas came in, they described the center of the earth had a mountain or pillar. Also, Turkmen tribes, they described a pillar at Earth's navel. And in Buddhist culture, they said there's a mountain with a hole in a city called Shambhala at the center of the earth. And it was actually in 1569 AD, the famous mapmaker Gerardus Mercator, he actually mapped out the earth with the center showing a magnetic mountain at this land with the four rivers. So in civilizations, particularly around India, people went from saying like a tree of life or a world tree at Earth's center, like in early Hindu civilizations, and then it went from, once the Vedas were here, when the Rig Veda was written around about 1500 BC, then all of a sudden they were saying there was a pillar or a mountain at Earth's center, and all others after that have described it as a mountain or a pillar. So it went from a giant tree at Earth's center, to a magnetic mountain or a pillar at the center. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show some comparisons of mountains to parts of trees, or really the remains of trees. So first let's look at, in Wyoming, this is called Devil's Tower. And notice, it kind of looks really obvious. It looks like this is the lower part of a tree. Like this would be like where the roots are, and this would be the start of the bottom of the trunk. Also notice that name, Devil's Tower. Remember, the devil tries to take your soul, take your life. Like someone took this tree's life. This is in Australia. This is called Ayers Rock. And here you can see a side-by-side comparison of a tree stump and this giant rock in Australia. This is in New Mexico. This is called Shiprock. And again, it looks like that first picture I showed of the broken tree stump. This is in Arizona. This is the Cathedral Red Rock. Also in Arizona, this is the Tower Butte, and this one kind of looks like that first tree stump I showed, with the roots at the bottom, and this is the beginning of the bottom of the trunk. And there's many others in Arizona and that surrounding area, and there's many just all over the world. This is in Ethiopia, and again, this is a side-by-side comparison. and also in Venezuela, and really there's just many others just all over the world. And there's a lot of them in the area around like Colorado. Like this is the Colorado Plateau, and also you can look at the Cheyenne Mountains. And really, I also want to point out, it looks like Colorado is some kind of a big, like some kind of elite headquarters. It's like some kind of elite capital, or possibly a Freemason capital. Okay, I've talked about this guy, this ODD TV or ODD reality. Okay, so he talks about, he makes videos where he talks about a lot of like elite themes and elite or occult symbolism in our culture. And okay, so he made a video that I saw in 2015 where he talks about Colorado. Okay, he lives in Colorado, and living there, he says he's seen a lot of evidence that points out that it seems like Colorado is some kind of big elite headquarters or elite capital. And okay, so one of the first things that he points out is, okay, so in Colorado, in Denver, they have this big Freemasonic airport, this DIA. Just all over this airport, they have all kinds of Freemason symbols. You have the square and compass, and yeah, it's just all over this airport. Also, if you just look at the seal of Colorado, like the state, like every state has a flag, has a state flag and a state seal. Okay, so the state seal of Colorado, if you look at it, it has a lot of really obvious occult symbolism just all over the state seal. Like here, it shows there's a all-seeing eye in the triangle or pyramid with the light coming out of it. Has some pentagrams. It's got right here it has like a Roman fasces, this bundle of sticks with this axe. Like this was cut down. I'm gonna get into that in a minute. Also, there's some Saturn symbolism, the double cross of the double X. Also, there's these two X's and this line. This kind of looks like Roman numerals. This is kind of a way of saying 9/11 in Roman numerals. Like this, the X with this line and this X, like XI is 11 and IX is 9 in Roman numerals. So this is kind of like saying 11-9 or 9/11. So there's also things like there's the red and blue, this hammer and sickle, and so yeah, there's all this occult symbolism just all over this the state seal, and like no other state seal has this just blatantly obvious just occult symbolism. Like all the other state seals look completely different. So it's like it's showing you that there's something different about Colorado. Like the elite had something different in mind. There's also a lot of in Colorado. There's a lot of government activity in the state. There's a lot of big government programs and big government organizations, like this NIST, this National Institute of Standards and Technology. They're the ones that created the big 9/11 cover-up story. And also NORAD is in the mountains of Colorado. Yeah, so NORAD, they have this big underground like military base going into these tunnels. Okay, so if this is true, if Colorado is this big elite capital, then there's some truth shown in movies, like in the movie The Hunger Games. Like on this map from the movie The Hunger Games, the U.S. is broken up into different districts that concentrate on different industries. You have all these different industries in these districts, and then right here it says this is the capital, And where this capital is, that's pretty much, it looks like that's about where Colorado is. So it looks like it's showing you Colorado was some kind of elite capital. And really this whole area around Colorado, like all this in New Mexico and Arizona, these also have a lot of government activity, a lot of government agencies, government programs. And yeah, I couldn't figure out why this was. Like when I started learning about this, I couldn't figure out, like, why are all these government agencies and government programs in this area, and why did they choose, like, why they have Colorado as the capital? I couldn't figure this out until I started learning about no forest on flat Earth. It has to do with these mountains. They looks like they have something to do with the tree of life. Like these mountains are connected to giant trees that were once here, and they were, yeah, they're not here now. They were destroyed somehow, and it looks like the elite have to control their remains. Like NORAD is built into the Cheyenne Mountains, and there are a lot of like military bases, like just underground, just all over the mountains in Colorado. Okay, now studying the material from these mountains and plateaus. Now, if you just look at them, there seems to be like a similar, like a root and cell system that you see in forms of life today. Now, the difference is in this material. Now, this material in these mountains and plateaus, it seems to be a lot of silicon. Like these would be, if these were forms of life, they must have been silica-based life. And what we think of as trees today, these are carbon-based. Like when we find, like there were petrified wood, like pieces in these areas around these mountains and plateaus. Like there's ancient pieces of wood. It looks like there's big pieces of like branches, and it contains like crystals in the center. And now this silica-based like petrified wood, it can be broken up into blocks with crystals, and it looks pretty much just like precious gems, like emerald, topaz, opal, peridot. These are all silica-based gems. Okay, so now people have studied like different parts of the earth. Like you can look at the ice walls in the Arctic. Now this silica-based life that I'm talking about, it seems to have been displaced by these big ice cliffs. Like these big ice cliffs, they contain carbon. Now these ice cliffs formed in a way that shows that a lot of biomass is missing. Like a lot of silica-based life it's been displaced or destroyed. It's just gone somehow. So much that it seems that over 99% of the life that was originally on Earth is now gone. It's missing. Like today, there's maybe 1% of the life that was supposed to be here originally. Now, evidence connecting these mountains. Okay, so they say there was once now there's a mountain at the center of the Earth and they say there was once a giant tree, and these other mountains that are connected to giant trees. Okay, now you can look at like Devil's Tower. Now they say that this was formed from lava flow. Like scientists, they say that it was like magma was pushed up to the surface and it overflowed in this lava. Well, this can't be, because if you look at the top of a lot of these, like Devil's Tower, you can see a clear hexagon structure, and this is very similar to what you see in living organism cells. They have the same shape. Like if you look at, like these are human cells, and you can see clear hexagons. So that's what you see in living cells. It has this hexagon shape. And also in these mountains, there's a system of like underground that there's like caves that resembles a tree's root system. Like there's caves around these mountains and plateaus and they contain the same silica-based crystal structure. So like if you map out the caves around these mountains, it looks like the giant root system of a giant tree that's just stretched all over the land. And with these silica remains just going all around these caves and these mountains, like also the rocks and minerals from Earth's surface. It looks like the rocks are basically transitions from silica-based life to carbon-based life. And it's not just this, if it was this carbon-based life that was destroyed, also a lot of the silica-based life that was destroyed, a lot of the carbon-based trees were also cut down. Like there's just a few left that are in these ones, like in the national parks, like the giant sequoias in like the redwood forest. Like they say these are the oldest and largest trees left on Earth. But so if these mountains and plateaus were the remains of giant trees, then these would be much older and much larger than the trees that we have today. Okay, so giant trees. So if these were giant trees, like, so what happened? Like, if they're gone now, like, how could they have been, like, cut down? Well, first I need to point out, it looks like there's evidence that people used to be much larger than they are now. Like, in certain parts of the world, they found the remains of very large people that are much larger than anything you can find today on Earth. But also in these places, there are people still living today that are very tall and much larger than most people living today. And also, people have seen there are giant machines that are used in mining and like excavation. Some of them are still used today. Like this big rotary excavator, this could possibly be used to do this kind of tearing down of this giant life that was once here from these mountains. Now, obviously, a lot of this history has been hidden from us, and now a lot of this has been able to be passed down, but it's in like stories and spiritual teachings, and it's in like symbolic texts. Now, the first place we can look for evidence of this is actually the Bible, and really the first story of the Bible, the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Now, just that name, the Garden of Eden, that's one of the many names for what's at the center of our flat Earth plane. They call it Eden or the Garden of Eden. Now, in the Bible, it talks about the Garden of Eden, and it says it had a giant tree. They called it the Tree of Knowledge. Now, okay, in these scriptures, in the story of the Garden of Eden, it says that Adam and Eve were instructed to not eat from this tree of knowledge. Like they were already provided food, and they were instructed just to not eat from this one tree. And in the story, it ends up they do eat from the tree, and they ended up getting cast out of the Garden of Eden. Now, shortly after this story in the Bible, there's a story that says there was a great flood. Now, every civilization in the world has talked about some kind of a giant flood that happened many centuries ago. Like in the Bible, in the Noah's Ark story, it says there was a great flood. And in the philosopher Plato, in his writings, he said the cities of Enoch and Lemuria were destroyed by a flood. And also Atlantis was known to be destroyed by a flood. Also, ancient Mayan texts said that there was some kind of a great flood. And ancient Chinese texts say there was a great flood. So all these people all over the world talked about there was a giant flood. Okay, now, in all these stories of a great flood, this seemed to mark a massive change in the world. They say that this is what made the world like what it is today. Like, let's say there was a giant flood, and now if you look at the world today, it's covered with water. It's covered in oceans. So now there are several scripts from the Bible that lead to this idea. Okay, so the Earth went from this time of giant silicon-based life, and this was this time of the Garden of Eden with the Tree of Knowledge. And so there was this giant tree at Earth's center. And now this time of the Garden of Eden, now this was known to be, it was said in the Bible that this was a very harmonious and just incredible time. And it went from that to this time that we have now, this time where we have these psychotic, parasitic leaders, and there's all of this disorder and suffering. And this time seems to be marked by a great flood and the destruction of this tree at Earth's center. And that's possibly what they meant by eating from the tree of knowledge. Maybe like eating away at it, like devouring, like our parasitic leaders. It's like they got us to take on their parasitic ways, and that's how this tree in the Garden of Eden was destroyed. And there's several scriptures you can look at from the Bible that point this out. Okay, you can look at the book of Daniel in chapter 4, verse 10. It has this scripture. It said, "The tree grew and became strong, and its top reached to heaven, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth." So it seems to be talking about a giant tree. And also, I like to point out, okay, I was talking about our parasitic leaders that have all this disorder and suffering. Well, these parasitic leaders seem to be most prominently in the Roman Empire. And notice, now the word Roman is a word that means tree. And if you take the W in Rowan and turn it upside down, it spells Roman. It's like turning it upside down, like our parasitic leaders do. They twist things and turn them backwards and upside down. And then you go from Rowan, meaning tree, to Roman, like the Roman Empire. And there's many other scriptures from the Bible that point this out. You can look at Psalms 82. It says, "God standeth in the congregation of the mighty. He judgeth among the gods. They know not, neither will they understand. They walk on in darkness, and all the foundations of the earth are out of course. I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High." So it's saying we're all children connected to God, connected to the Creator, and now all the foundations of the world they're off. Everything has been disrupted, and there's all this destruction and disorder. And you can also look at this scripture it's from the book of Isaiah. It's from chapter 14. It says, "Yea, the fir trees rejoice at thee, something the cedars of Lebanon, saying, Since thou art laid down, no feller is come up against thee, and consider thee, saying, Is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake kingdoms, that made the world as a desert, and destroyed the cities thereof?" So again, it's talking about the same thing, all this destruction. It's talking about this, like the destruction of cities like Enoch and Atlantis, and same as the Garden of Eden. Okay, so this time of the Garden of Eden. Now this time was also known as the Golden Age, sometimes called the Golden Age of Saturn. Now this Golden Age of Saturn, this is known to be the Golden Age of the Black Sun. This is when the Black Sun was our main source of light and warmth of Earth. And this center of the earth, this is what the Buddhists call Shambhala. Now, there's a book called The Sensei of Shambhala, written by Anastasia Novik. And it kind of talks about this golden age of the Black Sun. In the Sensei of Shambhala, book 4, it says, Ra was worshipped. Ra is the sun above us. So this was as the god of the daylight sun. Before the archonic priests used the image of Ra, people used to worship the god Atum, representing the evening sun, known for creating the world. Originally came from the goddess Atuma, showed herself on a hill out of the waters of noon, with a lotus flower blossoming out of this hill, with bright light shining through darkness. Atuma maintained order with an all-seeing eye on her crown made of lotus petals. And sometimes, like this, on this map made by Gerardus Mercator, you see these four islands, these four lands at the center of the earth. Sometimes these are compared to the petals of a lotus. So it's talking about this center of the earth, and this time when we were connected with the black sun. That was the main sun, and that was known to be the god, like it was with the spirit of the feminine goddess, and that's what they were talking about with the goddess Atuma. And so this connecting with the black sun and connecting with these this silica-based life and this tree that was once at the center of the earth, this describes our connection with this black sun and this energy coming from the feminine goddess. And if you look at a topographical map, like where these mountains are now, like these lines going all over the land where these mountains are, these would have been like roots that were sticking up all over the surface of the land. It kind of looks like it's like going to where these mountains are and connecting where these big silicon-based life forms were, and this would have been going underground in cave systems, all with this silicon crystal formation. Okay, now, today in technology, silicon is used for chips and circuitry, for electronics. Like these silicon chips, these are used to carry energy to all parts of a circuit board. Like silicon is a great semiconductor for an electronic charge. So on our flat Earth plane, we would have caves and hills, like connecting these mountains and plateaus with one big magnetic mountain at the center. So this mountain has a hole, and that's known to emit this energy, this, whatever you want to call it, this astrolite, this vril. So this would have been carried through these silica systems, carrying this vril, this very pure form, to every part of the earth. This would have been going through these silica cave systems with this silica-based light where these mountains are. So this vril would have been flowing through like the earth would have been a giant circuit board with this energy flowing through it. And this vril has been called things like the substance that forms all creation. It's been called the fountain of youth, the elixir of life. Like people that connect with this have been known to be stronger, more vitality, and some would say they become like superhuman. So what these old texts are saying is like about the golden age, like in the Garden of Eden with the tree of life and the golden age of Saturn and the black sun. This astrolite, this vril, used to come through like a giant tree at Earth's center, and it stretched all over the Earth. It probably had a big canopy that just like covered the sky, and its roots would have just gone all over the land. It would have gave life to other giant trees just all over the Earth, and they would have been connected with this astrolite's energy through all of the silica crystals. So we would have been able to connect with this astrolite through these giant trees. And I'm sure we would have been more vital and like stronger than ever. So what this story of like the Garden of Eden and like Enoch and Lemuria, what they're telling us is that these parasitic ones that want to rule over us, they've like tricked us into adopting their nature and destroying our connection with the black sun. And so like we were in harmony in the Garden of Eden with the tree of life or the tree of knowledge, and we were kept healthy and vital by connecting with these giant trees for energy from like straight from the black sun. And we got tricked into the elites' ways, their ways of vampirism. Okay, so if we look at these giant trees, like where these mountains and plateaus where these giant trees would have been, these trees would have been like miles high and miles wide. Like this one in Venezuela, it's several miles wide. Okay, this would have been able to house like communities of like thousands of people, and it would have been still growing, still connected to this silica-based root system, connected with the astrolite. So it would have been still growing. So we would have been living in this giant, basically giant astrolite vril circuit system connected with Earth's energy. And early civilizations talked about how they used to live in trees. They used to live in these living organisms that used to house them, and they used to connect with their energy, with this elixir of life, this astrolite, that the substance that forms all creation. Okay, now, today, it's like we cut down trees, we kill them to build houses. So we make houses basically built out of this dead tree material, and so that's basically the energy that we're getting today. So when you're living in this house made of just cut down dead tree material, you're basically living in surrounded by death and destruction. The thing you have to remember is plants are conscious. I would argue plants are more conscious than a lot of people. And the thing is, plants are willing to provide for us. But the thing is, plants like it when good energy is directed at them. Okay, now there are people that understand this energy of plants and trees. Okay, you can look at a lot of natives of the Pacific, like Samoa, and like the natives of the Philippines, and also like the Amazon Indians. They are known to show an appreciation for the life of plants and the life of trees. Like they live amongst them, like they build their homes around trees, and they have all this plant life, and they have like garden. They're surrounded by gardens, and so they're surrounded by all these trees. So it's like everywhere they have fresh fruit. They have fruit-bearing trees growing everywhere, so they have all this food. They never have to worry about where they're going to get something to eat. They have fruit-bearing trees and gardens for food, and also for herbs for like medicine. They have plenty of shelter. So this is the kind of energy that they're surrounded by. And they've seen how we live in the system of the elite's control, and they've talked about like the absurdity of what we do in this system. Like, okay, so instead of living surrounded by beautiful gardens and fruit-bearing trees, we have lawns. Okay, so this lawn, like this plant here, we don't show appreciation for what it gives or even recognize it for its life. We just let it grow for a little while and then cut it. Like the Amazon Indians, they talk about how they know plants are conscious, and when you cut them just for no reason, especially without showing them any appreciation or recognition of their life, this hurts them. This gives them bad energy. So having this kind of lawn that you just grow for a little while and periodically cut, this is again the same thing, just you're surrounding yourself with this lawn. There's just more energy of just senseless destruction. So there are still some people that know the energy coming from plants and trees. And people used to live off this pure energy coming from trees, like coming straight from the source. I mean, plants and trees, they provide us with everything. They provide us with food, air, shelter, all the material that we use. So we were once living in trees, keeping them alive and harnessing their energy. When we don't appreciate them, we just devour and destroy. That's basically how you can describe the system. And that's what all these stories are showing us. Like the stories of not only Adam and Eve, there's been a lot of old stories over the years, like the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, like the Secret Garden, Lord of the Rings, the Dark Tower, and Avatar. Like this movie Avatar, now this has many deep esoteric themes, and it basically shows our history like hidden in plain sight. Like, first of all, this movie Avatar, it was made by this guy, James Cameron. Now this guy is he's actually a very high level Freemason. I think he's a 33rd degree Freemason, and he's been known to heavily participate in Hollywood's like lesser magic programs of hiding things in plain view. And he knows how this works. Like these occult symbols, they all the symbolism, it taps into people's subconscious and it basically hypnotizes them, draws them in, and it works. So this movie Avatar, it has a lot of heavy occult themes, and Avatar is the #1 movie ever. Like it's the biggest this movie's showing you what's going on and all these esoteric themes, and it's the biggest money-making blockbuster ever. There's like not even a close second. So in this movie, it basically shows these Navi people. They basically have a tree of life. They call it the tree of souls, and it gets. They show it gets torn down, and this is not only showing you what happened in our world at the center, but it's also showing you the truth of avatars. Like, these are not our real bodies. Like, some people inhabit these bodies. Like, some of the Navi people were just normal, there's appreciating this tree. But some were actually working for this kind of elite group that was kind of just posing as their people, but actually wanted to tear down their tree or like strip it of its vitality. And this is kind of symbolic of our leaders, who are appear to be normal people, but are actually kind of a low frequency people, not capable of compassion, like whatever you want to call them, reptilians, parasites, and what have you. And they are just basically mimicking and posing as normal, compassionate people, but behind closed doors you'd see something completely different, I'm sure. So this idea of giant trees that were torn down, you might think it sounds outrageous and unimaginable, but really it's really not that different than what goes on today. I mean, people don't respect and appreciate plants and trees, or just life in general, really. I mean, plants and trees, they give us everything, and most people are just ungrateful. They just take from them, just cut them down, and never show them any appreciation. So that's what we're trying to do with this center of the earth. I mean, if we show the earth and show the black sun and the feminine goddess more appreciation, maybe one day like the giant silica based life, maybe we can get giant trees like that to grow back on this part of the earth. But we have to start showing appreciation and directing our good energy to the earth and not just taking it for granted. So I really suggest you look into this yourself. I know it sounds crazy, but again, you have to do your own research and just decide for yourself. All right, well, thanks for watching, everyone.